Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, where we've got the TNT takes for you on Survivor 44. That's right, I'm your host, Chris. With me again is Jake, my co-host, and we've got a very special guest on the show. Omar, I didn't tell you this beforehand because I didn't want to put too much pressure on you, but you are the first Survivor CBS guest that we've had on the show. We've had many international Survivor players on the channel, but that now forever will be your title as the first guest of Survivor CBS. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm honored to be the first guest. Hopefully many more. But who have you had on international? I need to know. I watch all of them.
Well, listen, we know you're a fan of the international seasons as well. So I've had many Survivor South African players. I'm South African myself, but I live in New Zealand. So I've had Dino, Chappies, you name it. Most of the big players have been on Rob Bentele. For Australian Survivor, we've had Dirty Harry, we've had Mark Wales, a bunch of different Australian Survivor players as well.
Amazing.
I feel like I'm leaving them off the list, and they'll probably at me afterwards. But it's great to have you on the show, Omar. And I feel like, as a new age player of Survivor, we're going to get so much valuable insights because myself and Jake, obviously, we're just fans. We just watch the show. We realize we see a snippet of what actually happens out there.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to be here, and I love that you guys are well versed in all the versions so we can make comparisons if we need to. But I feel like even though they're all Survivor, they're all very different in how you should play them. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, so interesting. You're a fan of all these different seasons of the show. Were you a day one fan of the show, or when did your journey of Survivor start? When did you become a fan?
So I started watching when I was, I believe, 9 years old. And it was Survivor Borneo, but I didn't start like day one. The first episode I saw was episode 8 when Greg got voted out, and then I never stopped since then. So I used to tape it on VHS and have all my VHS tapes lined up. I used to watch them every day until the new one came on. So especially those early seasons, like I know everything about them. Later it blends a bit together, but I've never stopped watching.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like we have been on the same journey, in South Africa, when Survivor first came out, it was massive. The biggest one was Survivor Australian Outback when it first formed over in South Africa. But I did watch from the merge episode of Borneo and then sort of stayed with it pretty much.
Oh, very close. One episode off.
Yeah, so I feel like we've kind of got the same journey. Jake, welcome back to the podcast. How you've been doing?
I've been good. It's hearing you guys saying like, oh, you've been watching since Borneo. I'm kind of the same way. My mom would she would record it on a tape and play it for me in the womb. And then when I came out, my first words were "the tribe has spoken."
The doctors, true Gen Z.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. One of the things you won't know, Omar, but one of your fellow castaways from season 42 inspired Jake to apply for the show, and that is Marianne. So Marianne going out and winning the season has inspired Jake to also put himself out there and try and get on the show. What advice would you have for young Jake here if he did get onto the show? What would be the 3 key things he need to take into consideration going on the show?
Oh, to go on the show or to get on the show?
Let's say for him to go on the show, like what would be the 3 key things?
We already know I'm going to get on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep getting on the show for after the podcast. We don't want to have too much competition for Jake out there.
Yeah. Well, that segues into point number 1, which is believe in yourself. Like truly, if you don't have confidence that you can do something, then you are going to let that show. And if you let that show, like it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you get in there. If you're afraid that you're going to be annoying, for instance, you're probably going to end up being annoying. If you're afraid that you're going to be weak, you're probably going to let that psych you out and screw up a challenge. So really just believing in your natural abilities and going for it is very important, but it's a skill that's hard to acquire. And it's a skill that I was not really good at until I started practicing medicine, because then, those are the stakes in that situation are very high. So if you don't believe in what you're doing, then, there's a patient's life on the line. I mean, it's an animal, but people, they care a lot about them. So it's like that skill set I found translated into Survivor, and whatever in your life would help you do that, I would recommend that. I would say be flexible. So even though you're a fan of the show and know all of the strategy, I'm assuming, don't go in with a rigid mindset. And I feel like that's why I lost the game, was when I had a very rigid mindset of what I wanted to do instead of just going with the flow. And the third thing I would say is, I would do like resistance. Okay, so I joined F45, a gym. And I don't know if you know anything about that, because I think it has started
Yeah,
in
I do. Yeah.
yeah. So I just started that pretty recently, but I found that if I had done that before Survivor, I would have been better at the challenges because it really focuses on a lot of a mixture of like cardio and strength and resistance training. And I feel like that is like a good skill set to have for challenges. So that's what I would recommend on the physical side.
All
So
solid advice.
memorize the puzzles, and then
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. Yeah.
train really hard for the physical stuff, or just
Yeah.
just build a replica in your backyard or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, now that you say that, that's such an interesting point too. Is that this whole puzzle situation where people are making them
Mhm.
and doing them now, it's getting a lot of attention now in the new era because Evie did that. And
Mhm.
actually, I had done that with the same puzzle that Evie had, and I was like hoping that that would be there, but I was just a season off. And then now again with Matthew practicing that thing, I think one, it's reflection that maybe the show should like change it up a bit so that it's not
Mm.
so predictable. Or like I think especially with a puzzle, like if you have the ability to memorize it and know what you're doing, then that takes away the skill set that you're testing with a puzzle. But also it's interesting because this has been happening before. Like David Wright did that a lot, and it didn't really pan out successfully for him. But it's not necessarily a new concept, which I thought it's just getting more
Joey
attention now.
Amazing. He
Oh
he
yeah, he
had
did that too.
a whole obstacle course in his backyard specifically
Mhm.
for Survivor challenges, and that's why he was so good at Survivor challenges. He kind of was one of
Mhm.
the first to do it. But I want to say hello to a few people here in the live just before we get into the episode any further. We've got Chris back, our moderator that'll keep the channel in check. I'm sure everybody will behave today. Andre Lee, welcome back to the live as well. Christian Gal is a fellow Canadian, so
Ooh,
saying we've got a Canadian here in the house.
love
Rooting
that.
for
George,
Kane this season.
yeah,
Obviously.
Georgette Sparkles. Thomas calling me out for not mentioning Luke Toki having been on the channel, and that is a pretty big one. That
How do
I
you
left
miss
out.
that, Chris? Come on.
I know. It's bad on me. And Luke will, he'll definitely tell me off for that as well. Gabe has said, who can afford 3D printers?
They're expensive.
They're
They're
expensive.
very expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. But I kind of feel like now you're at a disadvantage if you don't have them. But let's study at the beginning of the episode. I want to talk a little bit about, they go back to camp. I'm going to say Orange, Ratu, Tribe. I'm probably going to go in and out with the tribe names. I don't know why we still have tribe names if we don't have themes for the season. It's like a little bit of a pet peeve I've got with Jeff at the moment. Like, give us themed seasons if you're going to have tribe names in my mind.
It seems like they like change one letter or like switch two letters in the or like in 41 they had that one tribe. It was Ua.
Yeah.
Just two letters. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, really?
Yeah. Anyways, so I guess there's a question I've got here for you, Omar. The shot in the dark. Your season, it wasn't a big thing. It kind of seemed like everybody was trying to hold on to their vote. What did you think of this first episode and the aftermath with the shot in the dark being played successfully? Do you like the shot in the dark in the game as someone that's been out there that has played the game? And were you surprised people were playing this hard so early on in the season?
Yeah, I think until this season, I think even though it didn't play a big role in our season, it was played more on ours than either 41 or 43. Although most didn't really play a lot at the tribal councils I was at. Only Mariah played hers at the one that I was at. But I think that I really like the shot in the dark because it makes people have to blindside people. You can't have the easy out of telling them they're going home. And if you have a very, very boring episode where somebody's like definitely going, they at least have one more out where they can try to fight for their life. So I actually do like it. Is 1 in 6. I think the equation, that could be something to consider. It's like maybe if people play it, then the odds get better and better, or it stays the same. Either way, I think it's a good addition to the season because it's an element, and it's also like you have to sacrifice something to give something, and I like that part of it as well. It didn't really factor a lot into my strategy because I didn't really feel like I needed to play it, but if I ever did, like, I think that is a great thing to have around. I think Matthew used it in a very interesting way in that he used it to not pick a side. And, in 42, like not having a vote at one point in time was like very advantageous. And, he saw the value in like not choosing a side. And I think that's very smart. Now, whether or not, that's a good long-term decision because now you've lost your kind of out. I don't know. Like, but also it has a low chance of hitting anyway. So maybe this is more valuable.
Yeah, it did seem though, Jake, that Matthew got off lighter in this situation than Kane did in any case, because Kane did end up being the only person who voted for Brandon. He played his idol. Matthew continues to be, I think, pretty impressive at this stage in the game, and is someone that I've got my eye on. Were you happy with him using a shot in the dark in this way? Because now he's used that one extra life potentially he's got in the game at the very first tribal council here.
So I think, Omar, you would know. Do you get your shot in the dark back at the merge?
No. So from what I'm aware of, if you use your shot in the dark, that's it. However, you can give your shot in the dark to somebody else.
Oh, wow.
So like we were all told that if you wanted to give yours to somebody, you could, but at one particular tribal, you can still only play one. So if Matthew has a very good ally, he could get it from somebody else, but I don't know if he can rely on that. And I mean, also then they lose theirs, so there's a lot that goes into it, I feel like.
I kind of feel like they try to bring that in as like bargaining power, like they did with the fire. What was it? The fire tokens.
Fire tokens, yeah.
It's kind of like a bargaining thing. Like, hey, if you give me your vote this round, I'll just give you my shot in the dark in the game. Do you think that's kind of what they were thinking, Omar, with making it flexible? Because that's not something that's been explained to us as the viewers, I don't think.
I mean, I think so. I think that it's good in that you can, I mean, just like an advantage or whatever, you can trade that. So I feel like that's a reasonable thing. I kind of like the idea though of because it doesn't have that much power. I do like the idea of giving it to somebody and having them be able to play both of them or all of them. I get that it's like a 1-for-1 vote thing, but it is also kind of a situation where, like if, for instance, you're going into a merge and you're 5-5, like some of these other seasons are, like that could really, well, I guess then you don't want to necessarily lose your vote. But if you're a minority, it might be good to have an extra chance at safety. Like, I don't know. I feel like it could be a more interesting game if you could play more than one, if you had more than one at a particular tribal. But I also see why they don't want to do that, because it's like, if you don't have anything else to give up by playing a second one.
Now, I've got a really interesting question, and it's kind of going back to the first episode. It's one of the things that, for me personally, as a fan, annoyed me a little bit, but I don't know if it would annoy you as a player as much as it did for me, watching it. In the first episode, when they go to the no-name island and they have this non-choice of having to select an option. I really don't like it when production forces players to make moves and they take the decision away from the player. How did you feel about the fact that they were forced to lose potentially a vote because they have to go for the advantage, opposed to the previous one where they had to kind of size each other up and then decide if they were going to risk their vote or not? Because I think the previous dynamic, for me personally, I think is a better dynamic. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I'm of the mindset that I don't mind it, just because I think we all know when we go on these journeys that you don't know what's on the other side and you are taking a risk. And even there's a social risk to going, of like, maybe you'll be perceived as more valuable, or maybe you'll be perceived as a threat or sketchy and you have to know what story to tell when you get back and all of that stuff. So I think that going to the island, this is just another sort of like risk reward of what you're doing. And if you don't want to do any of that, then you really shouldn't go at all. So I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I do personally like the choice better because I think it's more interesting, but I also understand that they have to like evolve what that particular thing is, because it can't always be the same. What I do think that they should do though is that not make every journey on the same season the same dilemma, because you have now players like Sarah who are coming back and they're not able to really lie effectively, because if she says, oh, I find out at tribal if I lost my vote or not, that's now verifiable for anybody that goes to there in the future. But if it's always different, then it's not always the same, and it's more interesting, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. And there's two new advantages in the game as well, which I think is quite interesting, right? You've got the inheritance advantage and then the additional vote. I really like the whole bank your vote idea, because there's a risk and reward to gaining the additional vote. So there's an extra step to get it. Really good, obviously, for Lauren to get out of that first tribal council and have that in her pocket. That now puts her in a lot of power in this tribe. Jake, specifically coming back here, she's now got 2 votes in this tribe of 5, which makes her very powerful in the game. We were very fearful that she might be the first person out. Would you say she's in a rock solid place strategically now in the game, and that people are going to try and work with her moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I know that she was pretty close with Brandon And according to interviews, Maddie was like, that's kind of the big reason why she wanted Brandon out, because she wanted to be closer to Lauren. So I think she's got, I mean, if she has 2 votes, she only needs, I guess she would need 2 more, since that would make 6 votes overall at a tribal. I'm sure she can get 2 more. I think she's in a good spot.
And Kane, obviously, he's in a lot of trouble here, Omar. We see him
Mhm.
scrambling quite a bit in this episode, going out looking
Yeah.
for idols and things like that. How difficult is it in a tribe of 6 or 5 in this case to be able to go out and do these things? I know you found a nullifier, which was
Mhm.
never really shown on the show.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how difficult it is to go out there and try and look for things.
I think it entirely depends on the vibe of your tribe. Our vibe was very much cohesion and sticking together. And for the first 4 days, nobody left anybody's side at all. There was no if you were gone for too long, it would be seen as weird, because we were all had the same strategy of not going off and being isolated. So we typically would stick together. And so to go off would be really weird. I think in the first 4 days, I looked for the idol for maybe 15 minutes total. And those were in the in-between moments where somebody was in confessional, someone was bathing in the ocean, somebody else was doing something else. So it was a very brief moment to get away. And then later on, we kind of went on a group idol hunt, and that was my way of doing it without having a target on my back, because if we're all doing it, then we can get away with it. Other tribes, I think it was maybe easier. Also, in the first few days, you're getting used to the cameras. You're supposed to have cameras follow you when you're looking for an idol, and so then you're worried that they'll blow your cover. So then people, at least I was more hesitant to do it at first, until you got comfortable with how everybody operated. And that's nothing on them. That's more of the unfamiliarity of the player and how to operate within that game. So I think that these tribes seem more individual, and so they may be able to get away with that much more easily.
A lot of wild cards on the cast is one of the reasons I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying it so far. Chris has got a question for you based on your season. She says that Jeff recently revealed in his most recent podcast that Jonathan accidentally threw a clue to the idol nullifier out with fish guts. Omar, did you know about that, or was it a surprise to you finding out that happened?
No, I woke up late today because it's my day off. So then I woke up to all these text messages being like, "Do you know about this? Do you know about this?" And I was like, when I have these messages from random alumni from the past, I'm like, something happened. So then I checked it out, and I did not know. None of us knew about this. That there was a clue in the fish. It makes a lot more sense, because I just found the nullifier by the water well with Jonathan, actually. And we had no context for why it was there. At first, I actually thought that every beach had one, because I was like, why would we get one but not the others? But then it also coincided with the reward. So eventually I figured out that it was to do with the reward, but we did not find the clue, did not know there was a clue. So that was kind of cool to see that. That's a little Easter egg. That's fine. That nullifier is the hidden mystery that keeps on adding other layers to it. So it's very,
I love it.
cool.
I love it. We've got synergy because this channel's name is the Nullified Take,
yeah.
because I love the Nullifier, where a lot of fans don't like the Nullifier as much. I wanted to ask you, because you brought up alumni, and there's been some Twitter beef going on, and obviously I don't want you to pick a side or get in trouble or anything like that.
Is there Twitter beef going on? I don't even know about this.
There's too much Twitter. There's too much Twitter. There's too much Twitter beef going on. You can't keep up with it. But some alumni are calling out some of the new school players for the game being easier. Is that something that you have to deal with?
Wait,
apparently.
Tell me more. I don't know any about that.
So I don't know the specific names. I saw one tweet by Randy being a troll, but that is just what Randy
that's just
does.
Randy.
That's just Randy being Randy. But apparently Carson has said, they're getting a bit of heat coming their way from alumni of the show, saying that the show is easier now. Have you ever had to deal with those kind of comments? Is there any?
I've heard it periodically, but it doesn't really matter. Honestly, the thing is, when we went out there, we didn't know it was going to be 26 days. I think if you polled everybody before the game started, everybody would have preferred a 39-day game. But at the same time, you're playing Survivor, you can't be that picky about it. And it was very difficult. I think regardless of how long it is, it's difficult. Is it more difficult than 39 days? I have no idea, because I haven't played. Nobody actually has played both. So nobody can really say. But I would say I think 39 days is probably more difficult. But at the same time, what we did in 26 days was not necessarily easy either. I lost a pound a day. There were, after about a week or two, I was to the point actually just over a pound a day when there was points where I would stand up and black out a little bit and wonder if I was going to pass out. Jonathan actually did pass out the day that I went home that they didn't really show. So it's not necessarily easy by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, like it's not the player's fault that it's shorter.
I feel like it's a generational thing, right? You get these older
Yeah.
generations, they're like, back in my day, it used to be so much
Yeah.
harder. I had to walk to the water well to go get water and all this kind of thing. I feel like it's just a reflection of human society in these different generations. Now, I know as a fan, I love the 39 days more, but one of the theories myself and Jake have had in the past is that I almost feel like a 26-day game makes it harder to strategize and come up with a blind side, because if you had 39 days, you've got that whole extra day in that cycle, right? That you can still come up with blind sides and potentially change the nature of the game. And also, you guys are in small tribes of 6, so there's not anywhere to hide for someone playing this game, right?
Yeah, I mean, and also, I guess, even though I don't know how the difference between the two because I've never played 39, but like there was a point in time in Survivor where it was way harder for sure, with 1,000%, because they weren't given like clean drinking water. They weren't sometimes also not given food. Like people were almost passing out and like dying of hypovolemia. So like these things are since 33 and onward, like it's hard to like 33 and onward. Like if you have a cushy environment with like the basic necessities and more food, like can we really compare 29 to 36? Like, or sorry, whatever the opposite of that, like I don't know. But in a 6-person tribe, like you can't really hide. But I found that the game was actually like quite slow for our tribe. I can't speak to Vati. Vati was a hot mess on season 42, and these 3 tribes are messes as well, the 2 that have gone to tribal. So I can't really speak to that, but our dynamics were very stable for the whole pre-merge. So for the first 13 days it was very slow, and the gameplay was very gradual. After the merge, you have 1 to 2 day cycles, but I think the new age of Survivor, that doesn't matter that there's not that extra day anymore. To some extent, I think one area it would help is the ability to read people better and know their tells of when they're lying. But in the new era of Survivor, oftentimes the plan that's coming together about who's going to go home happens within 1 to 3, 4 hours before tribal council. And so people are hedging their bets until that point in time anyway. So whether they're hedging their bets for 1 or 2 days as opposed to 2 or 3, I don't think it makes that much of a difference.
Yeah. And listen, I agree with you. The whole thing is, this is a Jeff thing. This is a production thing. They've decided to change the format of the game, and obviously fans are going to be divided on that. But the players are not to blame for this. You guys are living, if I had the call, if Jeff said to me, Chris, do you want to come play for 26 days? I'd play. I'd play for 14 days. I don't care. I'd play whatever he wants me to play to get on the show and actually get to meet Jeff, who I've been watching since I was like 10 years old. I think it would just be a dream come true. Chris Todd here in the comments says, I think having the game go faster with less days makes 26 harder. And then Christian Gal says 39 days is better. So obviously people will always be divided on this. And then Josh won the snake puzzle. I think someone asked.
I think somebody was asking.
Any confirmation? Yeah. Do we have any confirmation that Josh is on this season? It's so sad. Who in your season did you had this experience out there playing with the players? I know we're a little bit off topic from what's happening this season, but Josh is a great example of someone that's not really getting a lot of airtime. Was there someone that you were excited that we didn't get to see more of them on the TV show, and you had a completely different view of them being out there on the island?
Oh, so sorry. Like, do you think? Was I excited to see more of somebody than I thought that we would see? I was surprised that we saw as much of Romeo's game as we saw, but it was kind of nice to see what he was thinking behind the scenes, because he didn't really talk a lot at camp. So hearing his confessionals, some of which were very sassy, were very funny to watch. So I think that, he's a player that I think had a bigger story than I thought was going to be the case before the season. I think our season, they did a really good job of editing everybody pretty evenly across the board. And I think somebody had told me it was the most evenly edited Survivor season of all time, or something very close to that. So there was a lot of people who were on the outs or didn't have a lot of power that still had their story told, which I thought was nice. I'm sad that Josh isn't getting more airtime yet, but because he's my winner pick. However,
oh wow,
the season is still so early. Like, there's still plenty of time for that to happen. It probably won't be in the same way as Australian Survivor, where somebody can be invisible for like 10 episodes and then all of a sudden you can't get rid of them. But hopefully we'll get his story at some point.
Yeah, I hope so. I think he's someone with a big story. Obviously, we know a little bit of his background coming into the game. Jake, I wanted to ask you, coming back to the actual season here, we get a little bit more of the Green tribe, of the Soka tribe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but there is a bit of a budding romance that is forming in this tribe. You know, Matt has been a big character coming onto the show. Are you all for seeing a showmance on the show? It's the first one in many seasons. And how big of a threat do you think this is going to be in the game for both of them? Because they're both for my draft team, and I've only got 4 players left after
maybe.
this. So
You
I'm a bit worried.
You incepted it.
I'm worried. I picked them back to back as well. So, Jake, what's your thoughts here? Is there any hope for them? Because it looks like they're a big target.
Selfishly, I want them to crash and burn so I can destroy you once again in the draft.
Jake, the game bot.
No, I need to be real. I think they're adorable. I think that they're really cute. I will say, coming into this, you remember, Chris, I thought that Matt was going to be really awkward. Like, being an engineer myself, I know software engineers they kind of tend to be not the most outgoing people out there. So I was very glad to see that he's really social, and he's recovered from a breakup already. He's ready to get back in the game, apparently. And I got to say, sorry, this is a bit off topic, jumping ahead, but when he revealed to Franny that he had actually lost both his votes, and he was like, I actually have to tell you something. I thought he was going to like admit his love for her.
Yeah,
I was
me too.
don't, not now. Luckily, it wasn't that.
But I feel like if she doesn't get it, then she is so oblivious to it, because he's clearly flirting with her out there. You know, he's making moves from his end, even though it's subtle. Omar, I know when you went out there, you were taken man. You couldn't get involved in anything like this.
Yeah.
How would you deal with something like this if you were out on the island and you had 2 people getting that close, and you're like, these are 2 solid votes in a 6-person tribe?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love the Nerdmans. I think it's very fun. We don't see a lot of showmances on Survivor because the conditions are so gross there that they don't have any sort of romantic feelings for the most part, because you're so deprived of everything else. So I thought that's really fun storyline. It's also an atypical showmance. It's not like a Figgy and Taylor. Like, it's something that's different that we haven't seen before. It's actually weirdly something I thought was going to happen with Cochran and Sophie, and they would probably die if they heard me say that, like way back when. But now, so I think that's really fun. I think that in a game of Survivor, I think traditionally in the past, people would have targeted that very strongly, and it would have been a big threat. I think now people are always looking for a shield. Like, that's the shield game is the thing. And they're coming off, what have they witnessed the last 2 seasons? The people that were unexpected taking over at the end, and the bigger threats going home one at a time. And the last thing that they saw right before playing this game was Marianne winning after a series of big players went out one after the other. And so if you can find 2 people to hide behind, and those 2 people, if you can get in with them, and that's 2 votes on your side, like, I see that personally as an asset. I also think it's easier to take control of a tribe as a showmance in a smaller group like this, because you have fewer relationships to manage. So, like, if Franny has a very good friend in one of the other 4 people, then automatically they have control of half the tribe, or Matt, vice versa. So I think that they are going to do fine. And I think it's too early to target something like this.
Tom, with so far the comment of the live saying, what about Ty and Mark, the most beautiful showmans to ever happen? And Gabe saying, finally a Nerdmans as well. So, yeah, listen, I'm very happy that you've got some hope for them and that you think that people could get behind them. I mean, Claire seems to be very worried. We saw that Claire was the person who is in a 3-person alliance with them as well, based on the hidden scene from last week. So clearly she's a bit worried that there might be some heat coming to that alliance. My biggest fear at the moment is Matt not having votes for 2 tribal councils in a row. Do you know, Omar, if those non-votes fall away automatically when they get to the merge, or does it carry over if he was to go without going to tribal council once? If he was to go into the merge, would he still not have a vote for those first 2?
I think so. I think it carries over because I lost my vote at the merge. That carried over into there. Jesse and Janine lost their vote at the merge. It carried over. So I think it does.
I think it's
Yeah.
only for those beware idols. I think there was a clause. It was like, oh, but if you make it to the merge and you still
Yeah.
haven't gotten your vote back, then you automatically get it back.
All right, I
Yeah.
remember something like that. So that was on the beware advantages.
Mhm.
Another thing here by Green, like while we're talking about the Green tribe, that I found really funny is, a lot of tribes deal differently with people going out looking for idols. Clearly, Kane, everybody was onto him. They clocked him very early on. Matt wasn't going to get him, wasn't going to let him get away with it. But on this tribe, we've got Danny, high energy, kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Tony Vlachos type of character.
Yeah.
He's running around looking for an idol, and Claire says he's got too much energy, and they're all thinking he's just out looking for firewood or palm fronds and things like that. How funny was it, Omar, to see Danny go out there looking for this key that he finds on his own, and then sort of pulling off the birdcage, I think the correct way, by actually getting the
Mhm.
idol without anybody noticing and putting the fake in there.
I think that Danny, as far as high energy and out there as he is, he's the one that I liked how each tribe, the cage idol, was found in a different way. And
Mm.
his way was the most effective. And he's not somebody that you would necessarily think from a first take is going to be the one to pull it off so well. So I think Danny's been a really fun character. What I want to know from Danny is like, where are his social relationships, where are his alliance, and where does he see himself falling in the numbers? Like, how is he going to use this idol? And also, will he hide the key again for somebody else to find or not?
Mhm.
Because on one hand, it's very easy to hide that key and then have somebody else find it. But once the jig is up and they get to emerge and hear there should have been two things in there, then they may
Mm.
know something's up. Whereas on the other side of things, if you don't hide the key again, then there's plausible deniability about maybe it was never found.
Yeah, so it's almost better not to hide the key again and hope that no one finds the extra idol in there, and they might think both are still in the cage, than actually going out there and hiding it. Because my mind immediately was thinking, you go hide the key, you pretend to look for it with someone else, and you kind of
Yeah.
lead them to that, and then you can try and say, listen, let's work together, or you can try and form this alliance with them, like Maddie tried to do with Brandon in the first episode. But that's why I love the birdcage so much, Jake, because
Mhm.
I actually think this is one of the things where Jeff has gotten it completely right this season with doing this. It's a great twist. It's something new. How satisfied are you with the way the birdcage has played out so far? Obviously, we see Caroline later on as well, and that was a whole different story.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but so far it's been great. I was a little disappointed, like, they in the first episode they looked for it as a tribe. I was kind of hoping that one person would get it, and then but it was just revealed to everybody, and then he ended up playing it successfully in the same episode. So I'm also hoping that they get something else on that tribe as well. But so far, this has been a really, really good twist. I think it's been one of, if not the best twists of the new era. Right when I saw it leaked on Inside Survivor, I knew it was going to be good.
Yeah. Chris here says, I'm glad Danny is keeping his mouth shut. I hope he sticks to that. I've always said that when you get an idol, you need to just, obviously with the weird idols, you couldn't do
Yeah.
anything, but I always feel like
Yeah.
you have to keep that a secret as long in the game as you can. We've seen that in Australian Survivors. Sean did that, which was very hard to
Mhm.
do this season. And he's only just recently tried to use it as a leveraging tool when he was outside of the numbers, which I don't have as much of a problem with it when you do that. But when you're in power, and you're sitting pretty, I don't understand why, Omar, people are so quick to share the idol when they find it out there.
I mean, in this history of Survivor, there's been times where sharing the idol can build trust and build an alliance, and also get people not paranoid because the outsiders don't have it, so you don't have to split the vote or whatever it may be. But that was also in an era of Survivor where there were a lot of people that didn't they weren't necessarily huge fans of the game, or they haven't seen the evolution. And now the evolution of the game has gone to a lot more chaotic and random,
Voting
um
blocks, right? You
and
get voting blocks
voting,
opposed to
yeah,
alliances. Yeah.
voting
Mhm.
blocks, and also like a lot more self-interest where people are not going to ride behind somebody and hope that they're going to beat them at the end anymore. Like, that kind of gameplay has not been the case for several seasons now. So now there's not a lot of reward to sharing that immunity idol, and a lot of risk to doing so. And so I think we finally swung fully the other way now. And also now there's the whole issue of knowledge is power, and
Mm.
inheritance, like all of these advantages that further incentivize players to hide what they have going on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I want to move to the Tika Purple tribe. I feel like this tribe has got a lot of similarities to the tribe that you were on in your season because
Oh,
they
hell,
had
tell
a
me.
yeah, because well, they had a medevac
Oh,
or a
yeah, yeah,
person
yeah.
pulled very early on in the game, which obviously puts pressure on a tribe because you're immediately down to 5 people. You've lost the life in the game. If you do end up, going to tribal council, immediately you could be that next person voted out. Your chances get slimmer. And then secondly, they've got a larger than life personality in Carolyn in the tribe, similar to Marianne on
Yep.
the season that she was playing. I think that Carolyn does make Marianne look very normal and low key compared to her. Like Carolyn is next level. But how do you sort of see the dynamics within this purple tribe? Can you see some of that similarities now that I've mentioned it?
I think, well, firstly, I think every morning we should thank God for Carolyn and her existence on the show. She's excellent TV for sure. Love her and love her energy. It's very infectious. In terms of Tika versus Taku, I think that, superficially there are similarities in that we had a medevac very early on, but the vibes, I think Helen was kind of driving the game to be similar to Taku, and that, there was a core group, try to keep everybody glued to that group and have a layer of protection. So it seemed like her and Sarah were kind of the core in her mind, at least from what it showed on the show. Like Carson was there as like a solid 3, and then they were trying to get Jam Jam in as 4 and make that a tight 4 with one person on the outside of that. However, I think that the rest of the tribe is too chaotic for that. Like Lindsay, Jonathan, myself, and Marianne as well, even though she is a big personality, we're all very in those early stages of the game conservative game players, and the thing is, within our tribe, everybody thought they were at the top, so nobody wanted to disrupt the hierarchy. Whereas here in the Tika tribe, there are people that feel like they are on the outs and they know they're on the outs, and the swing vote in the middle is more willing to swing from side to side and do whatever. And actually, Carson, I feel, is like in a very similar position to where I was in the sense that at one point in time, there was Jonathan and Lindsay on one side and they were trying to vote Marianne out, and then Marianne was on the other side thinking we're trying to vote Lindsay out. So, and I could have gone either way. So in that sense, he has that ability, but he got down to a core where he had to choose and put pen to paper. And I would have had to do that if we lost again, but we never did. So in that sense, I see a similarity in our positions, but I think overall as the vibe of the tribe, they're a lot more individualistic than I think we were. We were very much collective. And we only have each other and we have 2 other tribes to battle. So let's work together and make sure that happens. Whereas these guys, it seems like the vibe of this tribe as well as Ratu are, we don't have to worry about everybody else right now because we only have to worry about each other. So it's a very individual game.
It's interesting you mentioned that because Sarah was left out of the vote when they turned against Helen, which you focused on bringing Marianne into the vote to make her still feel like she was tight with that 4 moving forward in the game. So I'm interested to see how Sarah is going to react and if she's just going to play with that tribe moving forward if they were to get into a merge situation in the future, if she even gets there. I don't know what Carson's plans is moving forward because it does look like he's closer to Yam Yam and both Carolyn in the game. But Jake, Carolyn, first episode, I told you I think she's a little bit much for me. If I was out on the island, I would struggle with that amount of energy personally.
You said the same thing about Marianne.
I did.
Yeah.
So call me out. I did say that, but Marianne grew on me as the season went on, and I think Carolyn's doing the same. So my initial reaction is too much. And then I'm like, I'm intrigued because they're a lot of fun on the show. Did you enjoy what you saw from Carolyn in this episode? Going out there, looking for this key, finding it, the craziness of opening it, going back to camp, forgetting to close it. Do you love what she's bringing to the show at the moment?
I love it because obviously I'm not as, out there as her, but I feel like I would do kind of the same thing of like, wait, I didn't put it back. It's just wide open. Or, okay, did you guys notice this? I haven't seen anybody mention this. When she was explaining like, okay, here's the idol, here's the fake one, she mixed them up.
I heard that, but what I don't know is that I think I need to go back and look at the actual note, because I think that what was the confusion that on Danny had one version of the idol that was the idol and she had the other one, but I think that they're not the same. On
I don't think
every
they're the same.
beach.
Yeah, I think they're slightly different from each other from what I've seen when they get it. So I don't know. But I mean, I wouldn't put it past Carolyn to get it mixed up because she's just all over the place and she's got so much energy.
She read it too fast. Her
Yeah.
mind was going a million different places. Yeah, something similar would happen to me. I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I got an idol. Oh my gosh, and just not reading it thoroughly. Yeah,
I think we need to go back and check that because
Does anybody in the chat know? Does anybody in the chat know? Let us know if the idols are different in each one of the tribes, because I feel like they're slightly different from each other. They're not exactly the same.
I thought I remembered when Brandon found it and when Danny found it, they had like the idol with the beads. She didn't.
Tara's got it. I think Tara. I trust Tara here. She says she didn't mix them up.
Okay.
The fakes correspond to another tribe's real idol, because that would make it even more, easy to fool people out there.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay,
I think that's what they were going for, which is really chaotic on production's part.
I really like that though. I would not expect them to do that. Clearly, I was not giving Carolyn enough credit to read the note correctly, but I really like that.
So everybody in the live is saying the same thing. So clearly, the live knows more than us at this stage about that. But I wanted to bring something up, Omar, because this episode, seeing Carolyn run around, looking for this idol, climbing trees, putting a hand on a snake, I would have freaked the hell out. Now, you're an exotic veterinarian.
Yes.
You've dealt with a lot of different animals before. Have you handled snakes before? And I'm not talking about your previous tribe mates.
Yes. Yes, I've worked with a lot of snakes before. And I mean, so on that island, there's really two major groups of snakes. One are sea snakes. Those are the venomous ones. But sea snakes, even then, are like very docile. Like you really have to like try to get them to bite you for them to do anything. And even then, like sometimes their mouth is not big enough to actually get you. But like I wouldn't go mess with a sea snake by any means, but like they are very docile, but they're very potent in their venom. The snakes that are actually on the island are boas, and that's why they live in the trees. They live really high up. You don't really see them down on the ground or anything like that, but they are harmless. Like they couldn't kill you if they tried. So it's for everyone to be so scared of such an ant, like that snake was probably freaked out by her and was trying to get away. It's like it's so funny because you see these things like you should be more afraid of a cow than that snake. That snake can't do anything. Even if it wanted to kill you, it could not.
Yeah, it was such a fun scene because Carson's down there. We need help, everybody. So I don't know if he was shouting at production or who he was thinking was going to come to help them out there.
The cameramen are probably like, dude, it's just a boa, like chill.
I mean, I have it on good authority that Carson has a snake phobia. So
listen, I'll put my hand up. I'm the same. I'm not good with snakes. Obviously, grew up in South Africa. We had many venomous snakes growing up there. I've had some close encounters in the past, so I think maybe I've got a little bit of PTSD from stepping on snakes and things like that. So I would be freaked out as well. And even if you tell me it's not poisonous, I don't want to go near it, Jake.
I live in Arizona, and so I've seen, in the desert, there's a lot of rattlesnakes. They terrify me, man. At
least you hear them. Like they warn you. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah. They'll tell you. They'll tell you they're coming for you. But still, I've had like people I know, their dogs have died, unfortunately, from getting bit by rattlesnake. It's really sad. So just seeing like a snake-ish figure, I wouldn't even be thinking about what kind of snake it was. I'd be freaked out.
The only thing is like maybe it would be a good food source because they have a lot of meat on them and they're not venomous.
That's true. Like that. And boas are a lot bigger, right?
These ones are like they can be big, but a lot of the ones on that island are like pretty small.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to move on to the immunity challenge here. Obviously, all immunity challenges have got some really cool twists to it, and they kind of have these obstacles that they've got to go through and work as a team. I'm more interested as a contestant, as someone that is out there participating in these challenges. Can you talk us through what it feels like when you're out there doing these challenges? You're at your second immunity challenge at this stage in the game. Jeff is out there, and you're in the middle of it. Obviously, we get the nice edited versions sitting in the comfort of our own home. What is it like actually competing in some of these challenges?
These challenges, I mean, okay, so I went into Survivor obviously being more of a strategist and a social player. And so for me, the physical component of it was going to be my lowest strength. And so I was terrified. I mean, I never was an athlete. Like that's not who I am. So like I don't even know how to compete per se. So like I'm competitive, but not in a sports like setting. So for me, I found the challenges to be very scary, but it was very interesting because if you really embrace something that makes you uncomfortable, then you can really get something out of it. And so, especially that first immunity challenge that we won, um, and came in first place, that was a huge motivating factor because you want to replicate that high. But I found that every challenge, the anxiety was like up here, and then as the season went on, like it would get lower and lower, and you'd actually be excited. And then one of the things I missed the most about playing the game is actually the challenges, which I never would have thought about before because they're actually quite fun. But there is a lot of stakes. Like at this point in the game, we had already lost Jackson to a medevac. We were kind of like a family of five, so like we did not want to lose at all because we didn't want to send anybody home. And so the pressure was super high because we've only won one challenge, so you don't know if it's a fluke or if you're going to keep repeating it. And so there's no lower feeling I felt on Survivor than losing that tribal immunity challenge, because you just have this feel of like despair and like you don't know what's going to happen, and it's very gut wrenching. So with tribes that are more individualistic, I don't know if they felt quite that devastated, but like I would be interested to hear their perspective.
Yeah. What was it like? You said you weren't the big sport person going in, or you never really competed growing up, but being next to someone who was super competitive, who did a reality TV show called Endurance as a kid,
Yeah.
it tells you
Yeah.
a lot about Jonathan. What was it like competing with him, and how did he handle, working with a team where physically him and Lindsay were both just at a different level, right?
They were both elevated, but that's the thing is like Jonathan is a really good team player, and so is Lindsay. Like they're both very good team players. Like they're not the types to like you could tell sometimes Jonathan was a bit frustrated with certain performances, but he would never let that carry or affect him, and he would be very collaborative. And so it wasn't like a dictatorship. So he was actually very motivating. And as a group, especially our group of four just had so many varied skill sets that Marion and I were very good at puzzles, whereas Jonathan was not good at puzzles. Lindsay was not great at puzzles. Well, she didn't really prove herself one way or another, so we don't know. But they were
Good
very
for
good
her. If
about
she
being
ever goes
like,
out and plays again, right? Good for her.
yeah, we don't know what she's capable of, but like you go into, we were good about separating our skill sets and like putting people in the optimal position and not making people feel bad about what they weren't good at. So having him was like a safety net of like, he was very encouraging, and it was also, you could fall back on his physical strength. So it made it better for me.
Oh, that's good. So looking at this challenge, at the end of it, Jake, Matt tells everybody that he's got this, obstacle in the back of his yard. He's built it himself out of plywood. Carson's got a very different way of approaching this. I think I would have followed the Carson way. I wouldn't want people to know that I've been practicing prior to going out there. Do you think this spells bad news for Matt going forward into the game, or Matthew going forward into the game?
I'm not sure. I mean, listen, we see everybody kind of does these types of things. Like everybody knows, everybody practices fire before going out. Everybody knows they bulk up super hard, or at least like try to gain some weight before going out. I'm not sure that's gonna put too much of a target on him, but I did find it funny how Carson kind of dissed the producers in his confessional. He's just like, yeah, so I noticed that production is extremely lazy and reuses the same challenges every time. So I just 3D printed them at my house. So I thought that was funny, but I don't think that Matthew's going to get that big of a target just based on that comment.
What do you think, Omar? Like, you've been out there. What is the conversations like on the beach now? Is everybody just expects you to be a fan when you're out there? They expect you to do all these things before you go out there, or does it still create a little bit of a target on your back where you're like, I don't want to go up against this person because they've practiced all the puzzles, or the different obstacles going into the merge. They might be a threat as an individual person in this game.
Yeah, I think it didn't. So for our season, I was afraid to show that I was a fan, but then I got out there and people were especially Marianne was fairly open about it. So my strategy was like, I'm going to reveal them a fan, but like not as much of a fan as Marianne. So I was like, there's a fan shield in some sense of that. But it's interesting that, when we kind of came together, there was an understanding that everybody knew Survivor, everybody watched Survivor. So, it wasn't really like we weren't particularly worried that this person knew more than that person and that they were going to do stuff like that. But also nobody was as open as Matthew is about how, oh, thanks, Kay. We love that too. We love the talking for, but there was nobody as open as Matthew of like, I've done this, that, and the other thing. And I would never have revealed that I knew that stuff, and neither would Marianne or anybody else. So I think the timing and when he did it though was when emotions were super high, and it's going to be easy for people to kind of forget that because Tika's worried about going to tribal council. They're excited they won. Soka's relieved that they didn't lose. So I don't know how much it will stick, to be honest.
And they also kind of, like you mentioned, Jonathan was that person you could fall back on that was
Yes.
like the clutch player in the team to pull out wins. So maybe at this stage in the game it does, because he said from the start he's worried he's the oldest guy in that tribe. He's worried he's going to be perceived as a weakness in that tribe. He's maybe trying to prove that he is someone that they can rely on for these clutch situations as they go through the team portion of the game. So maybe that makes him a solid number that you don't want to get rid of prior to the merge, if that makes sense. So I feel like the first goal is just to get to merge, right? And then when you get to merge, anything can happen from that point forward.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think he's probably in the best position, I think, in that tribe because he hasn't really revealed his loyalty. He's protected a number one ally in Brandon. Brandon still has the bigger target for being the one that survived the idol play. And then the others have their energy focused on Kane because he's the one that stuck out like a sore thumb. So I think he's actually in a very good position right now.
Yeah, I want to bring up the comment here by Andre Lee saying, concern for Matthew. He's trying hard to prove himself to the point he is going to get voted out too early. I hope not, but I feel like Matthew is exactly the kind of guy that even if he did go early, Jeff loves Matthew. You can just tell.
Definitely.
And I think Matthew would have a chance of getting out there again. Omar, when you play the game, can you get a feel for who Jeff likes? Do you get a feel like, Jeff is really going back to this person a lot?
I think that well, I think nobody really had a consistent view of that. So like, I didn't really think that Jeff liked me, but then Marianne's like, what are you talking about? He always asks you questions. But I was like, I don't know. I feel like he didn't really care for me. But at the same time, like we had opposite perceptions. So it's like, who knows really? I think Jeff is very good at being objective and doesn't really give away who he loves as much. But I could tell out there, like he really gravitated towards like Marianne, Jonathan, and Mike quite a bit. But I didn't think that he didn't like anybody I just said I didn't think he liked me, but I mean, he just didn't really care about me that much compared to them, I thought. But like he's very good at just being very professional. So I don't think he really gives it away as much as people think.
Yeah. Fellow content creator Flynn Masters in the chat saying, Omar, what's up? So very excited
Flynn
to see you.
Masters. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so basically at this challenge, obviously we see that the Purple Tribe, they end up losing this, which is going to send them now to Tribal Council. And there's a bit of a scramble that happens here prior to Tribal Council with Carolyn feeling like she's in the outs and the Young Person Alliance coming together, which I thought personally was going to be a very solid 3-person alliance. Jake, I saw a lot of people online saying that young people just can't stick together anymore in this game. What do you think about that as probably one of those young people if you were ever to go out there and play the game? Why can't the young cast come together and vote together in the game?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I remember in 41, there was, I think in episode 1, it was JD that talked to Sarah and was like, yeah, us young people, we never stick together. We need to stick together. And then I was like, oh, I thought it was like, they subtitled it. Like, it's probably going to be important. Like either they're going to stick together or they're going to crash and burn or something. It's going to be relevant somehow. Or maybe it's setting up for 42. Sometimes they do that. And maybe they're just pointing out like young people. Maybe they're just showing like, hey, young people, why don't you just stick together? Because I agree. Like, I don't think they're doing it on purpose, obviously, but it doesn't seem to really happen as much. Like, and I still don't really, we'll get into it, but I'm still a bit confused on why Carson didn't stick with those
I
two.
think I've got a little insight on that. And Omar, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on it. When they went back to the idol cage and they thought that someone was in the idol cage, Carson clearly said he did not trust Helen. He thought she was lying. And he's read all these books about how to detect, when somebody is lying to you, which obviously is a lot harder when you go out there and play the game. Do you think that was in the back of his head where he was like, she's got something up her sleeve. I don't know if I can fully trust her in the game. And why did the edit sort of point that out to us? I feel like they wanted to give us a bit of a reason for why he turned against her.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mystery of this whole episode is why Carson flipped. And I say flipped in air quotes because what we don't know right now is whether or not he was always with the other two and was, we got the reverse story. So the thing I can think of the last time that happening very obviously was in Survivor Cagayan, where it seemed like Bryce and Morgan had an alliance against the other members, but then it turns out that everybody was against them, and we learned that in the next episode when Bryce went home. So like it was like Jeremiah, they were pulling in Jeremiah, but it turns out Jeremiah was always with the other side. So in this season, like, did we get that Sarah, Helen, Carson story first, so that it would be surprising when he flipped, or was he always, or did he truly flip? And the other question is, if he did flip, why did he flip? Did he flip because he has more control of Jam Jam and Carolyn, or did he flip because Sarah lost her vote and he didn't want to force a tie? I think that's the missing link here. So if he was kind of forced into flipping, then I think that's an interesting dynamic that we haven't seen play on the screen yet.
And I wonder, when we watch Australian Survivor, you can't help. I always say it's two different shows. It's very hard to compare the two against each other. I know fans want to if they watch both shows and they've got their favorites. But one of the things I do appreciate about Australian Survivor and even Survivor South Africa is you see a vote come together. You see this is what's being put in place. And even when they go to tribal council, we're in on the vote. So there's a certain amount of enjoyment knowing somebody's sitting at tribal council and they don't see the axe coming. Survivor US have always been different. They're about blindsiding the audience, and I feel like sometimes we miss out on so much key, pivotal, strategic talk that would let us in on the vote. Why do you think, Omar, over there, that they are doing that? Why do you think that's the sort of recipe that they're following, opposed to giving us a little bit more insight in regards to why this sort of split happened within the tribe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, I'm not sure, because I think it's like an editing style that's just very different. And I think so US Survivors trying to cater to like a broader audience, whereas Survivor South Africa and Survivor or Australian Survivor are catering to a more niche audience to some extent. And so they really enjoy that storytelling. Whereas US Survivor, you have to appeal to the broader community, and the broader community is going to potentially want to not be bored by who they think is going home. But I will say that Australian Survivor this season particularly has really been able to tell a story of why somebody's going home with also making it still suspenseful. Like there's many times going into tribal this season where I have no idea what's going to happen. And so they're able to, but they also have so much more time to work with. So I think that also comes down to it. Like a US audience isn't going to necessarily be able to tolerate a very long season. I feel like American television is very like short, and like you have to be to the point, and things that go on too long, like all these Netflix series that come out, they're like 8 episodes, like they're not super long. And so that makes it, it's a different style that works here. Whereas I think in Australia, correct me if I'm wrong, but like these major networks have these shows that are on several nights a week, and like that's normal. And so it's very different style here. And so I don't think the same type of story can be told.
Yeah, it's interesting how the Australian public can watch 3 episodes back to back to back and stick to it, right? And there is a lot of content, but I almost wonder if there is a case to be made for Survivor US having an extended cut on Paramount Plus, where if you wanted to see a little bit more of how the vote came together, I think for people like us who are super fans, for lack of a better term, who talk about the show, want to dissect the strategy and how we got to a certain vote, I think they would eat it all up. And if they could pay a little bit extra to see something online or see an extended cut, they'd probably be all over it, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, they already have kind of the secret scenes, but that's more like kind of fun, like something that happened before on the tribe that didn't lose. I think a lot of people would eat that up, but it's just more work to do for them, which I don't know if they'd really, want to go through that. But me personally, I'd eat it up. I'm already subscribed to Paramount Plus, so it wouldn't be any extra money. So
yeah.
Yeah. Flintmasters has got a good question here I want to bring up. He says, Omar, what was it like seeing all throughout 43 people commenting on who's going to be the Omar of the season, and that winner's big move would have been taken out by the biggest threat? So obviously, in my mind, Jesse became the Omar of 43. But what was it like seeing people talk like that and say, well, who's going to be that person? The fallen angel, basically.
Yeah, it was very nice. I mean, it was flattering to see. I mean, the thing is, you go out there, you don't really know how you're going to play. Well, you know how you might try to play, but you don't know how it'll come across. You don't know if you'll be successful. I remember when I got voted out, my first um, emotions were actually like tremendous embarrassment of like, wow, like you were really stupid and you thought you were smart. And so, like, then to kind of see the audience reception to your gameplay and like having people be like, that's the game I wanted to play, it is like, it's validating. So it was kind of fun to watch in that sense. And I think it's very indicative of what the new era has been so far in terms of like, if you show your game too early, you will be cut loose before the end. And like, how well can you hide it? And for how long can you hide it? And so I think that um, to be kind of that storyline of the new season of who is going to be that player that gets cut before the end, I think it's kind of cool. And we'll see if that pattern repeats this season or not. But I took that as a compliment. It was very fun to watch Jesse play the game too. Yeah, I think Jesse was better than I was, but like it was still fun to see him play, and sad to see him go when he did.
Jesse played a phenomenal game as well, but one of the things I think you really had down pat was timing. Like your timing for each one of your moves, and when you had certain conversations. I remember on the podcast when we recapped the episode where you spoke to Mike at the reward
Oh
when you were
yeah,
watching and you turned him against high. That was,
yeah,
you chose the exact moment when he was emotionally at his most vulnerable, getting,
yeah,
a message from home to get in there. And I think your timing was impeccable. Like I really applaud how you sort of created these rifts between allies and got them to turn their back against each other. I
yeah,
don't know how you did it. You had some sort of list
yeah.
out there.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think the thing is like some of that is also the story they decided to tell too, because it was very clear at that point in time that Mike wanted to go against High. Like I didn't know that going into the reward, but as soon as he started to talk at the reward, it was very clear that
Mm.
that's the direction that he was going, and so I just needed to like nudge him further in that direction. So I think that without him already not trusting High because, he was under the impression that Drea was in on Roxray's blind side, and then Drea told Mike otherwise. And even though she lied to him and she was in on the blind side, like he didn't believe that. So he was fully going to go against High at that point. And whether I wanted to or not. So I feel like the show gave me a bit more credit than I deserved in that sense. But like it was kind of it was kind of funny to watch on the show, like how much the word puppet came up after that. But so it was like a fun way. But I think at the same time, like the bigger thing that I think that they kind of underplayed on the show a little bit was like Lydia going home, and that was truly like kind of like turning Vati against each other to save our tribe. But it was also about timing and also motivation. I think motivation is a huge part of the game of like when to strike on someone. So you have Mike, who's very emotional and isn't already trusting High, like that's the time to strike. If you have High who's very worried he's going to go home because now there's only a few targets, that's the time to like sneak in a Lydia plan. So I think that that's also something that Jesse did very well on his season, was identifying motivations of players and like using that to his advantage.
Yeah, well, we've got Georgette asking a question here. I'm assuming you're open shop to work with anyone, right? If you were to go out there, you wouldn't limit yourself. I'm assuming.
I mean, I think beggars can't be choosers, right?
That would be a great duo to have on the show. So I endorse that message if we do get people going back. We do know that Bruce is going to be the first returnee player. We don't know if he's going back for an all-star second chance season or if it's with other new players, but I'm sure a lot of alumni is already hitting up Bruce right now because they know he's going to be
Oh
out
my
there playing
gosh.
the game again. His phone's probably, getting so many messages popping up each week now. But
Oh yeah.
I did want to say, with Bruce being gone, I think Christian brings up an interesting question here, saying that he thinks that the strategy may have been different to keep Helen and Sarah for strength if Bruce was still in the game. How much do you think Bruce being out of the game as this strong, big guy influenced Carson's decision? Because Yam Yam is being perceived as the strong person in the tribe now that they don't want to lose. Do you think that played
Mhm.
into their minds as well, Omar?
I think that I think it's clear that Tika is not really thinking that much about tribal strength, and they are thinking, well, I shouldn't say that. I think Carson, Carolyn, Jam Jam are thinking more on an individual level about what's best for their game. I think someone like Helen was trying to keep the tribe strong and keep the tribe unified moving forward, and those motivations came to a head, and Helen was the odd one out. which I feel bad for because I think Helen is great, and I thought for sure she has so much potential as a player, and so it's depressing to see her go in a way that kind of just the ball didn't bounce her way as opposed to herself. But in terms of like, would Bruce have changed the dynamics? I think he definitely would have changed the dynamics, but how that would have shifted, I don't think we have enough information on.
It sounded like Bruce was close to Carolyn from the first episode. She said that was the only person she was getting along with in that episode. Now, that's from her perspective. How true that is, I don't know. Maybe Bruce is getting along with everyone.
He was like in and out of consciousness from what I've heard.
Yeah, he's concussed, so it's hard to know where his head was.
He's like, hey, Carolyn. She's like, I'm getting along great with him.
Omar, it's been great having you on the show to answer all these questions. I do want to give you an opportunity because I told you were going to be on for an hour, and myself and Jake have not gone into our fantasy draft and points. You can stick around for that if you want. You can jump out if you want, but if you are jumping out, what else are you getting up to? Where can people follow you? Do you have any other podcast events coming up? I'm sure a lot of people want you to get on there. Anything you want to plug?
I don't have anything coming up that's planned, but I kind of do things as they come up. So that's been very fun to be part of the Survivor community in that way. I'm on Instagram at Ozahir24 and on Twitter at Omar Zahir DVM. So that's primarily where you can find me if you want to know what's going on. But other than that, I'm just kind of back to work. Just trying to save animals when I can.
Oh, well, listen, you definitely would be a hero if you were playing Australian Survivor with a job like that.
But I would be a villain on US Survivor.
You'd be the Matt of this season. The lifeguard that saves lives, but it's actually turned villain this season.
Yes.
Flynn Masters is saying
I think Rogue would have thought that I was a real hero. So.
Yeah, definitely. She would have thought you were a real hero. And my co-host for Australian Survivor would be very happy that you brought Rogue up because he goes rogue every single episode, mentioning her at least once. I don't know why.
Not a great take in general. I think Rogue should probably try to be forgotten, but it's a shame that Rogue was so insufferable because the one thing she was right about, nobody would listen to her because she was so insufferable, but Paige does suck. So that's it.
Yeah, listen, Omar, I had so much fun talking to you. If, in the future you ever want to jump on, talk about Survivor South Africa, Australian Survivor, any of those seasons as well, we're more than happy to have you back on the podcast. But I do want to give you the opportunity. If you want to jump out, you can do so.
Well, what do you have left?
So basically, we're just going to go into our fantasy draft. We're going to go through the points for that. If you want to stick around for that,
sure. Yeah, I'll check it out.
So it's not too nerdy for you? You're happy to stay for that?
No, yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, okay. So we've got each season, what we do is we've got a draft. Myself and Jake go head to head, but this season also our co-host Kahuna, who couldn't be here today because it's the middle of the Australian work day right now, couldn't be on the podcast. He is in there with us as well. Those are the teams at the moment. Obviously, I ended up losing Helen, so that puts me at a severe disadvantage going into the rest of the game. I'm down to 4 players now for the rest of the season, and Kahuna still hasn't lost anyone, Jake, and you remain with your 5 players at this point. How are you feeling about the draft and the way it's shaping up?
I mean, from what it seems like, Kahuna has 2 of the people that got advantages. They both, the Carolyn and Danny, both got idols. So that's
a strong team.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't lose any people this week, but and I do feel really good about Matthew, Claire, Lauren, Brandon, Jamie. I don't know. She seems a little emotional out there, but I like my team, but I'm worried about Kahuna's. He's stacking up all the advantages. Sarah's got one too, and he has her.
I'm feeling good about Yam Yam. I'm really loving the Yam Yam vibes that I'm getting. I was a big fan. I'm a big character fan, Omar. So I go for all the characters normally when I choose my teams. And I feel like Yam Yam has got a lot to give still this season. He's my under the radar person that I think could outlast a lot of people in the game. People aren't seeing him as a threat, but he is willing to play. Matt and Franny, I'm a little bit worried with them being in the Showmances. You gave me a little bit of hope because if one of them goes, the other one can go as well, and Matt not having any votes. And then Kane is clearly on the outside, Omar. So I'm a bit worried.
Well, you know what? Taku had 4 people left at this point in the game. And you have 4 people left, so maybe you'll be fine. But I have faith in Matt and Franny. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. Kane, I'm a little bit worried about. Jam Jam's now arguably in the best position on his tribe. Because with Carson was in the best position, but now with Carson having to make a decision, he and Carolyn being a little bit onto his game, I think that puts him in a more vulnerable position than he was before, because in making a decision, he's lost a little bit of power, and it's not his fault. He had to choose a side because they lost, but I think that Jam Jam is in the power seat on that tribe.
Yeah, it gives me a little bit of hope. I think Kahuna, having Carson, I think Carson is someone that I've got my eye on. I don't think he goes prior to the merge. I do think Sarah's in a lot of trouble in that tribe if they do end up going back to tribal council. But obviously she's got the inheritance, I guess, advantage. It's not going to help her that much if she's got to play at the specific episode that she's getting voted out. It would have been better to have an idol. But maybe if she's smart, she tells them about it and says, hey, this is something we can use as a weapon against the other tribes when we go into the merge. And maybe she garners some support that way. It's a tool that she can use. I don't know if she's willing to let people know when she's been holding this so close to her chest at this point. And then also he's got Danny, he's got Helen, and he's got Josh. I think Danny is someone that I don't know where to go with him yet. Like you said, he doesn't have the social connections, but I feel like he could be a big player. I just need to see him actually making connections with people, because I feel like you always see the winner and you always see them in a social environment with other people. And I haven't seen that yet for Danny. So I'm a little bit worried that he's maybe not more than just one big vote or one big idol play at this stage. So it can go either way for them. But I do want to get into the points. We do have a point system, and how it works, Omar, is that we give 1 point for confessionals, 5 points for team challenge wins. You have to win outright. So only the tribe that gets first place gets the 5 points, not the second place tribe. Individual immunity wins, when we get there, is going to give you 8 points. Making the merge gives you 5 points. Successful advantage plays is 10 points. Finding the advantage is 5 points. Getting a vote against you is minus 0.5. Becoming the runner-up is 25 points. Winning is 50 points. And then there is bonus confessional points for most of the season, most individual immunity wins in the season, most advantages found in the season, least votes casted against you in the season, and then most advantages played correctly. All gives you 25 bonus points. So there's a whole point structure. It's not just who wins the season outright.
Yeah, I like
they
that.
actually have to be MVPs. So when we look at that, I can say that I am in third place. No surprises there with only having 4 players in the game. I'm at 77.5 points. We do have a clear outright number 1 place. Last week we had a draw between Kahuna and Jake. But Jake, you're in second at 86. And that's the first time you've not led one of these drafts in must be a record amount of episodes, because last season you absolutely dominated me. And Kahuna's taken the lead at 91 points. So still close, only 5 points between you and Kahuna. But
that's surprising.
Yeah, very close. Kahuna's he's the new kid on the block. He's a contender. The top players currently in the game on points are in Jake's team, number 1, Brandon, with 24 points. Obviously, playing that idol correctly has helped him and finding it. In second place, we've got Matt in my team with 23 points. We've had a lot of him talking about his relationship status, losing his girlfriend, going out there, obviously. So he's got a lot of content at this stage. And then in third place is Danny at 21 points, and he's in Kahuna's team. But Kahuna does have the overall better team at this stage, and that is the points right there. Omar, what do you think of this? We've never actually had a survivor tell us, give us feedback on our point system.
I did something similar for Survivor 41 with my family. So most of those things were kind of on our board too. So I think it's kind of cool. I think that Jake's team is very chaotic. So that could be very good or very bad. We'll see.
Chaotic seems to get a lot of confessionals, which hopefully will help me.
Yeah.
Because you had Marianne in your team as well, Jake, when she won, and then you had Gabler.
Oh wow!
He just has a knack for picking them.
I think I had Gabler and Jesse, or did you have Jesse?
I think I had Jesse last season. I think
I had Cassidy. That's who.
Yeah.
I think actually I might have had. No, you had Owen. I thought I had the entire final 3.
Yeah. I had Owen as my winner pick last season. Like he was my number 1 pick.
Close.
Yeah.
He got a bit unlucky. He totally had the tools to do well, but it just didn't work out.
Didn't work out for him that season, but I think that Owen would be very interesting to watch on a second season, because I feel like if you've learned once playing the game and you've gone that deep, you're going to go with different skills in your tool set that you're going to use out there that you didn't have the first time. So I'd be very interested. And another person from that season that did really well was Ellie. Really enjoyed her as well. Like, even though she didn't make she made the merge, but she didn't make the jury. I'd love to see her play the game again as well.
Yeah, agreed.
That's really it for this week's recap. Everybody in the live, thank you so much for being here, being a part of the conversation, and asking some great questions. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Please consider liking. The more people we get following the channel, the more people like Omar I can bring out here. And they're not thinking, who's this guy? We don't know who he is with his 300 subscribers. But we're well and truly on our way to 2,000 subscribers. I think we're just over 1,600 now. So the channel is growing really nicely. Thank you for the support. And Jake, any final words from you? Was there anything we missed?
I think we covered it.
Omar, anything from your end? Anything you wanted me to ask that I didn't ask on the podcast?
No, this is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, guys.